The crash. The stars outside the cockpit were calm, glittering against the dark void of space. It was supposed to be another simple mission for Alex Carter, a lone explorer from Earth. His small spacecraft, the Nova Hope, had been traveling through uncharted space for weeks. Everything seemed normal until the storm came. It started as a faint shimmer in the distance, a ripple in space. Alex didn't think much of it. Strange sights were common when you were exploring the unknown. But within minutes, the shimmer grew larger, brighter, and began pulling the ship toward it. Alarms blared, and red lights flashed inside the cockpit. Emergency systems online. Warning, gravitational anomaly detected, said the cold voice of the ship's eye. Alex gripped the controls, his heart pounding. He pushed every button he could, trying to regain control, but the ship wasn't responding. The storm outside was alive, swirling with blue and white energy, dragging the Nova Hope closer and closer. "Come on, come on," Alex shouted, sweat dripping down his face. His hands trembled as he fought the controls. The ship groaned and creaked under the immense pressure. He glanced at the navigation screen. It was blank. He had no idea where he was or where he was going. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the storm released him. The ship spun wildly before plummeting toward an unknown planet below. Alex barely had time to activate the emergency landing system. "Brace for impact," the AI warned. The ship's engines roared, trying to slow the descent, but it wasn't enough. Alex saw the surface of the planet rushing up to meet him. A vast forest of massive, glowing trees stretched as far as the eye could see. The ship hit the ground with a deafening crash, tearing through the trees before skidding to a stop in a clearing. For a moment, everything was silent. The only sound was Alex's labored breathing. His head throbbed, and his body ached from the crash. He checked himself. No broken bones, just a few cuts and bruises. The cockpit was a mess. Sparks flew from damaged panels, and smoke filled the air. The emergency lights flickered weakly. System failure. Oxygen levels critical. The AI droned. Alex's heart sank. His oxygen supply was rapidly depleting. He grabbed his helmet and secured it, but he knew it wouldn't last long. He had to find shelter, and fast. He stumbled out of the wreckage, his legs shaking beneath him. The planet was unlike anything he had ever seen. The trees glowed faintly, casting an eerie blue light across the forest. Strange sounds echoed in the distance. Chirps, growls, and something else. Something deep and menacing. Alex felt like he was being watched. Every shadow seemed to move. He gripped the small survival knife from his belt, though he knew it wouldn't do much against whatever was out there. As he took a step forward, the ground beneath him crunched. He looked down and froze. Massive claw marks were carved into the soil, each one larger than his arm. Whatever made them was close, and it was big. Suddenly, a low growl rumbled through the trees. Alex's breath caught in his throat. He turned, trying to see where the sound was coming from, but the forest was too dense. The growl came again, louder this time. It was followed by heavy footsteps, each one shaking the ground slightly. Alex backed away, his pulse racing. "Stay calm," he whispered to himself. "Stay calm." The footsteps grew closer. Through the glowing trees, he could see a massive shadow moving toward him. It was at least 10 feet tall, maybe more, and its eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. Alex knew he couldn't fight it. He turned and ran. Branches slapped against his helmet as he pushed through the dense forest. His lungs burned, and his legs felt like they would give out at any moment. Behind him, the footsteps grew louder, faster. Whatever was chasing him was closing in. Alex stumbled into another clearing and tripped, falling hard onto the ground. He rolled over, expecting to see the creature pounce on him. Instead, he saw something else, a towering figure stepping out of the shadows. It was a 12-foot alien, unlike anything Alex had ever seen. She was covered in metallic armor that shimmered in the light of the glowing trees. Her eyes glowed a brilliant blue, and her massive frame was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. She carried a weapon unlike anything Alex could understand. Part blade, part energy cannon. Alex froze, his body paralyzed with fear and exhaustion. The alien looked down at him, her expression unreadable. She didn't attack. Instead, she knelt and reached out a massive hand toward him. Alex flinched but didn't move. The alien tilted her head, as if studying him. Her hand stopped just short of his chest, and she placed it gently on his shoulder. Her touch was surprisingly soft, almost caring. Before Alex could say anything, darkness crept into the edges of his vision. The lack of oxygen was catching up to him. The last thing he saw before passing out was the alien warrior queen lifting him effortlessly into her arms, her glowing eyes scanning the forest for danger. The alien queen's rescue. When Alex regained consciousness, his first thought was that he was dreaming. His body felt weightless, suspended in a warm, glowing light. Slowly, his vision cleared, and he realized he wasn't in the forest anymore. He was inside a cave, but it was no ordinary cave. The walls shimmered with a faint golden glow, pulsating as if alive. Strange, glowing plants clung to the surfaces, lighting the space with a soft blue hue. In the center of the cave, a large pool of crystal-clear liquid emitted a faint hum, as though it were some kind of energy source. Alex tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through his chest. He looked down and saw his torn spacesuit. The tears had been patched up with what looked like organic fibers, woven together with remarkable precision. His injuries had been tended to, cleaned and wrapped in a glowing, gel-like material that tingled against his skin. The realization hit him. Someone, or something, had saved his life. A shadow moved in the corner of his eye. Alex turned his head, his heart pounding. She was there, the alien warrior queen. She was sitting near the glowing pool, her massive form silhouetted against the light. Without her helmet, her face was more visible. Her features were sharp yet elegant, with faint, glowing markings running along her skin like ancient runes. Her piercing blue eyes glowed faintly as she stared at him, a mix of curiosity and caution in her expression. Alex froze, unsure what to do. She didn't seem hostile, but her size and presence were overwhelming. He raised a shaky hand in a universal gesture of peace, hoping she would understand. "Ah, hi," he croaked, his voice dry and weak. The queen tilted her head, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. She made no sound, but her gaze seemed to study him intently, as if trying to figure out what kind of creature he was. Slowly, she stood up, her towering frame making Alex feel even smaller. She moved toward him with deliberate grace, her footsteps barely making a sound despite her size. Alex instinctively pressed his back against the wall, his breathing quickening. Okay, no sudden moves," he muttered under his breath, trying to calm himself. The queen stopped a few feet away and crouched down to his level. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then, she did something Alex didn't expect. She spoke. Her voice was deep and resonant, filled with a strange musical quality. Alex didn't understand the words, but the tone wasn't aggressive. If anything, it sounded concerned. I don't understand you," Alex said, shaking his head. He pointed to his chest and said, "Human, Alex." Then he pointed at her, raising his eyebrows as if asking for her name. The queen blinked, her expression unreadable. After a moment, she reached out with her massive hand, palm open. Alex flinched but didn't pull away. Her fingers were large and clawed, but she was careful not to hurt him as she placed her hand gently over his chest. A faint glow emanated from her palm, and Alex felt a strange warmth spread through his body. It was as if she was scanning him, trying to understand him on a deeper level. He stared in awe, too stunned to speak. When she pulled her hand back, her glowing markings flared briefly. She turned and gestured toward the pool of light in the center of the cave. Alex hesitated, unsure what she wanted, but her movements were deliberate and calm. She wasn't forcing him, she was inviting him. He crawled closer to the pool, curiosity overriding his fear. As he leaned over the edge, he saw his reflection in the shimmering surface, but it wasn't just his reflection. Symbols and images danced around his face, shifting like ripples on water. They showed scenes of his crash, the forest, and even the creature that had chased him. How do you know all this?" Alex whispered, his mind racing. The queen didn't answer with words. Instead, she placed her hand over the pool, and the images shifted. They showed a vision of her past, her people, tall and proud, standing in an advanced city. Then the vision darkened. A massive fleet of ships appeared in the sky, firing beams of energy that destroyed everything in their path. The city crumbled, and her people fled into the wilderness. The last image was of the queen herself, standing alone in a ruined landscape, her armor scared and her weapon drawn. Alex felt a lump in his throat. She had lost everything. Before he could say anything, the vision changed again. This time, it showed his crashed ship, and something moving toward it. A group of alien creatures, smaller but armed, were scavenging the wreckage. One of them held a tracking device, and its red light blinked in sync with Alex's heart. "They're hunting me," Alex realized, his voice barely a whisper. The queen turned to him, her expression hardening. She pointed to him, then to herself, and finally to the glowing pool. It didn't take a translator to understand what she meant. She was offering to protect him, but he had to trust her. Alex nodded slowly, his fear giving way to determination. He didn't know why she had saved him, but one thing was clear. They were in this together now. Just then, a faint mechanical hum echoed from outside the cave. The queen's head snapped toward the entrance, her glowing eyes narrowing. She grabbed her weapon and motioned for Alex to stay low. The hunt was far from over. The hunter becomes the hunted. The forest was unnervingly quiet. Alex crouched behind a massive, glowing tree, struggling to keep his breathing steady. The queen was a few steps ahead, her towering frame hidden in the shadows. Her glowing blue eyes scanned the dense undergrowth. Every muscle in her body tensed. She had warned him to stay close, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was already watching them. His heart pounded in his chest as he gripped the makeshift spear the queen had handed him earlier. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The alien queen raised a hand, her palm glowing faintly in the dark. It was a signal to stop. Alex froze in place, his ears straining to catch any sound. For a moment, all he heard was the soft hum of the bioluminescent plants around them. Then, the silence was shattered. A piercing metallic screech tore through the forest, echoing off the massive trees. Alex's blood ran cold. The queen growled low in her throat, her hand tightening around her weapon. The screech was followed by a series of heavy, deliberate footsteps. Whatever was out there wasn't trying to hide. Alex peeked around the tree and immediately regretted it. The creature stalking them was massive, easily the size of a small building. Its body was covered in sleek, black exoskeleton armor that reflected the faint light of the forest. Multiple glowing red eyes lined its elongated head, and its claws gleamed like polished blades. Worse, it wasn't alone. Two smaller creatures flanked it, their movements quick and predatory. The queen let out a sharp, guttural sound that Alex assumed was some kind of warning. She stepped forward, placing herself between Alex and the creatures. Her presence was commanding, even against such overwhelming odds. The lead creature hissed, its red eyes narrowing as it locked onto the queen. It lunged forward with terrifying speed, its claws slashing through the air. But the queen was faster. She sidestepped gracefully, her massive blade slicing through the air with a hum. The creature roared as her weapon grazed its armored shoulder, sparks flying from the impact. The two smaller creatures darted toward Alex. Panic surged through him as he stumbled backward, his mind racing. He had no combat training, no idea how to fight something so deadly. But then he remembered the Queen's earlier lesson. Use your surroundings. Alex scanned the area and spotted a cluster of thick, glowing vines hanging from a nearby tree. As the first creature leaped toward him, he ducked and rolled, slashing at the vines with his spear. They snapped and fell, tangling around the creature's legs. It screeched in frustration, its claws tearing at the vines as it struggled to free itself. The second creature was already on him. It lunged, its claws aimed for his chest. Alex barely managed to block the attack with his spear, but the force sent him crashing to the ground. The creature loomed over him, its jaws opening to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth. Just as Alex thought it was over, the Queen appeared. Her blade flashed through the air, cleaving the creature in two before it could strike. She reached down and yanked Alex to his feet, her glowing eyes meeting his for a brief moment. There was no anger, no frustration, only determination. But their victory was short-lived. The lead creature roared, its wounds glowing with a strange, pulsating light. It was healing. Rapidly. The Queen growled and raised her weapon, ready to strike again. But the creature was learning. It moved faster, dodging her attacks with unnatural agility. Alex's mind raced. He had to do something, anything, to help. His gaze fell on the Queen's discarded energy grenade, a device she had shown him earlier but hadn't used yet. It was lying in the dirt, just out of reach of the fight. Crawling on his hands and knees, Alex inched toward the grenade. The Queen and the creature clashed behind him, their battle shaking the ground. His fingers closed around the device just as the creature let out a deafening roar. It had pinned the Queen against a tree, its claws digging into her armor. "Hey!" Alex shouted, his voice breaking. The creature turned its many eyes toward him, its mouth curling into a grotesque snarl. Alex's hands trembled as he activated the grenade, its surface glowing with an ominous red light. "Catch this, you ugly bastard," he muttered, hurling the grenade with all his strength. The grenade hit the creature square in the chest and detonated with a blinding flash. The shockwave knocked Alex off his feet, and he felt the heat of the explosion wash over him. When the light faded, the creature was gone, reduced to smoldering chunks of its exoskeleton. The Queen stepped forward, her armor scorched but intact. She looked at Alex, her expression unreadable. Then, to his surprise, she gave a small nod of approval. It wasn't much, but it was enough to tell him he had earned her respect. Before Alex could catch his breath, the Queen tensed and looked toward the horizon. A distant hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. She growled, motioning for Alex to follow her. Whatever was coming next, Alex knew one thing: their fight for survival was far from over. The Queen's passed. The sanctuary was quiet now, but Alex could feel the tension in the air. The alien Queen had led him back to her hidden cave after the battle. Her movements were slower, her breathing heavier. The fight had taken its toll on her, but she showed no signs of stopping. As she removed her armor piece by piece, Alex saw the extent of her injuries. Deep scratches across her arms, scorch marks on her shoulders, and faint, glowing scars crisscrossing her chest. Her body told a story of countless battles, each one etched into her skin. She didn't speak as she moved to the glowing pool at the center of the cave. Instead, she knelt by its edge and dipped her hands into the shimmering liquid. The water rippled, casting soft, golden light across the walls. Alex watched as the glow spread up her arms, slowly sealing the wounds and rejuvenating her strength. For a moment, Alex hesitated. He wanted to thank her, needed to, but the language barrier was an impossible wall between them. Instead, he crouched a few feet away, watching her carefully. She glanced at him, her glowing blue eyes unreadable. Then, without warning, she gestured toward the pool and pointed at him. "What?" Alex asked, his voice echoing in the cavern. "You want me to?" He mimicked her gesture, pointing to himself, then the pool. The Queen nodded and tapped the side of her head. Alex frowned but inched closer. As he peered into the pool, the shimmering surface began to change. His reflection dissolved, replaced by vivid images that danced across the water like a living storybook. The first image showed a planet, vibrant and alive, covered in crystalline cities that sparkled under twin suns. Alex gasped. The architecture was unlike anything he had ever seen. Towering spires that seemed to defy gravity, roads made of shimmering light, and ships that floated gracefully above the surface. The Queen touched the pool, and the image shifted. It now showed her people. Tall, proud beings like her, their glowing markings radiating a faint light as they worked and played. Families gathered under massive trees, and children laughed as they chased each other through the crystalline streets. The Queen herself was there, younger and unarmored, her face filled with a joy Alex couldn't imagine her having now. Then the image darkened. The twin suns faded, replaced by a black sky filled with alien ships. They weren't elegant or beautiful like the Queen's people. They were jagged and menacing, their designs built for war. The ships descended on the planet, their weapons raining destruction from above. Alex watched in horror as the peaceful cities crumbled. Buildings collapsed, forests burned, and her people were dragged away in chains. The invaders were smaller, insect-like creatures with spindly limbs and glowing red eyes. Their movements were cruel and mechanical, their purpose clear: to enslave. The Queen touched the pool again, and the scene zoomed in on her younger self. She was hiding behind a shattered building, clutching the smaller alien, a child. Her expression was fierce, but her eyes betrayed her fear. As the invaders approached, she handed the child to another adult and stepped forward, drawing a weapon for the first time. Her scream of defiance echoed through the ruined city. The next series of images came fast and brutal. The Queen fought relentlessly, leading a small group of survivors into the wilderness. They battled against impossible odds, losing more people with each fight. The scars on her body told the rest of the story, each one a reminder of someone she couldn't save. Finally, the images slowed. The Queen was alone now, standing atop a cliff overlooking her devastated planet. The invaders had taken everything: her people, her home, her hope. She was the last of her kind. Alex felt his chest tighten as the pool's glow dimmed. The story was over, but its weight lingered in the air. He looked at the Queen, who was now watching him intently. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held a sadness that words could never convey. I'm so sorry," Alex said softly, knowing she couldn't understand him. He placed a hand over his heart and then gestured toward her, hoping she would feel the sincerity in his actions. To his surprise, the Queen responded. She raised her massive hand and mimicked the gesture, her glowing markings flaring briefly. It was the first time Alex felt like they truly connected, two beings from different worlds, bound by shared pain and survival. But the moment didn't last. The pool began to shimmer again, showing a new image. Alex leaned closer, his stomach twisting as he recognized what it was. It was his crashed ship, and surrounding it were the invaders. They had tracked him here. The red lights on their weapons blinked rhythmically, pulsing in time with the faint hum of their machinery. They were preparing for something, and whatever it was, Alex knew it wasn't good. The Queen growled low in her throat, her body tensing as she stood. She grabbed her weapon and pointed to the pool, then at Alex. Her meaning was clear. The invaders weren't just after him, they were after both of them. Alex nodded, his fear replaced by a growing determination. He had seen her past, her pain, and her strength. Now it was his turn to fight, not just for himself, but for the alien who had saved him. As they stepped out of the cave and into the glowing forest, Alex tightened his grip on his weapon. The hunt was on, but this time, he wasn't running. The enemy arrives. The stillness of the forest was deceiving. Alex crouched low behind a tangle of glowing vines, his breath shallow, and his muscles taut. The Queen was perched above him on a thick branch, her massive frame hidden among the bioluminescent leaves. Despite her size, she moved like a shadow, her weapon ready in her hands. The hum of approaching machines grew louder, vibrating through the ground and into Alex's chest. He clutched the small alien device the Queen had given him, a tool she had shown him how to use moments earlier. Its purpose was simple: trigger a controlled explosion from the traps they had set around the crash site. The Queen had trusted him with this task, and he wasn't about to fail her. Through the gaps in the foliage, Alex spotted movement. His heart sank as the invaders emerged into the clearing where his ship lay in ruins. They were insect-like, their slender, angular bodies reflecting the eerie glow of the forest. Their red, mechanical eyes scanned the area, and their limbs moved with a disturbing precision, as though they were extensions of some greater hive mind. One of them, a leader, by the look of its larger size and intricate armor, stepped forward, holding a blinking device in its clawed hand. The tracker. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. It was linked to his heart rate, pulsing in time with his frantic heartbeat. The invaders communicated with sharp clicks and hisses, their alien language grating on Alex's ears. The leader pointed toward the forest, and a smaller creature scuttled forward, sniffing the air like a predator on the hunt. Alex's fingers tightened around the device in his hand. His mouth was dry, his mind racing. They were getting too close. The Queen shifted slightly above him, her glowing blue eyes fixed on the leader. She didn't need words to communicate her plan. Her movements were deliberate, her focus unshakable. Alex knew what she was waiting for: the perfect moment to strike. Suddenly, the smaller scout creature froze. Its head snapped in Alex's direction, its glowing red eyes locking onto his position. It let out a shrill screech, and the other invaders turned as one. Now, Alex whispered to himself. He pressed the button on the device. The ground beneath the scout exploded in a brilliant flash of light and heat. The creature was launched into the air, its limbs scattering in every direction. The other invaders recoiled, their hisses turning into frenzied shrieks. The Queen leaped into action. She dropped from her perch like a thunderbolt, her massive blade slicing clean through one of the smaller invaders before it could react. Sparks flew as her weapon met their metallic exoskeletons, each strike precise and devastating. Alex scrambled out of his hiding spot, adrenaline surging through him. He grabbed a second device from his belt. The Queen had prepared multiple traps around the area. As the leader barked out orders in its alien tongue, Alex activated another explosive. This time, it targeted the group near the edge of the clearing. The blast sent them flying, their charred remains scattering across the glowing forest floor. But the leader was fast. It dodged the blast, its red eyes now fixed on Alex. With terrifying speed, it charged toward him, its sharp limbs slicing through the air. "Alex, move," he yelled to himself, ducking just in time to avoid a deadly swipe. He rolled across the ground, grabbing a fallen piece of metal from his ship as a makeshift shield. The leader's claws clanged against it, sparks flying. Before it could strike again, the Queen intervened. She lunged forward, her blade crashing into the leader's armored body. The impact sent both of them sprawling, their weapons locked in a deadly clash. The leader let out a guttural roar, its strength nearly matching hers. Alex didn't waste the opportunity. He grabbed one of the Queen's discarded energy grenades, its surface glowing faintly. He fumbled with the activation switch, his hands trembling, but finally managed to arm it. "Hey, over here," he shouted, drawing the leader's attention. The creature turned its head, and in that split second, Alex hurled the grenade with all his might. The Queen seemed to understand his plan instantly. She kicked the leader backward, forcing it directly into the path of the grenade. The explosion was deafening, the shockwave knocking Alex off his feet. When the dust settled, the leader lay in a crumpled heap, its armor shattered, and its red eyes dimmed. The Queen stood over the body, breathing heavily. Her glowing markings flared briefly, a sign of her victory. but there was no time to celebrate. The hum of more machines echoed through the forest. Reinforcements were coming, and this time, they were bigger. Alex could see the faint glow of their red eyes in the distance, dozens of them moving in unison. The Queen turned to Alex, her expression grim. She motioned for him to follow, her massive hand gripping his arm and pulling him to his feet. "We can't stay here," Alex said, though he knew she couldn't understand him. He didn't need words to know what she was thinking. They had to keep moving, or they wouldn't survive the next wave. As they disappeared into the forest, Alex felt a strange mix of fear and determination. The invaders weren't just after him, they were after her. And now, they were both caught in a deadly game of survival. But one thing was certain, he wasn't going down without a fight. The final stand. The air was thick with tension as Alex and the Queen reached the edge of a jagged cliff. Below them stretched a vast canyon, its depths illuminated by the faint glow of bioluminescent veins running through the rock. It was beautiful and deadly, a perfect natural trap. Alex glanced over his shoulder. The mechanical hum of the enemy was growing louder, closing in. The reinforcements were relentless, an unstoppable tide of red-eyed invaders sweeping through the forest. The Queen stood beside him, her massive form framed by the dim glow of the canyon. Her glowing blue eyes locked onto his, silently communicating what they both already knew. This was where they would make their stand. The Queen didn't wait for the invaders to reach them. With a sharp growl, she slammed her blade into the rocky ground, sending a shockwave rippling through the air. Loose boulders tumbled into the canyon, their echoes masking the sound of the approaching enemy. Alex tightened his grip on the alien weapon she had given him earlier. It was heavier than anything he'd ever used, but the Queen had shown him how to activate its energy pulse, a last resort. "They're coming," Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't know if she understood the words, but she understood the tone. Her markings flared brightly, signaling her readiness. The first wave of invaders emerged from the forest, their glowing red eyes cutting through the gloom. They moved in perfect synchronization, their sharp limbs clicking against the rocky ground. Alex's stomach churned. There were more of them than he'd expected, far more. The Queen didn't hesitate. She charged forward with a roar, her blade slicing through the first invader with a precision that bordered on artistry. Sparks and fragments of exoskeleton flew as she carved a path through the enemy ranks. Her movements were fluid and fierce, each strike landing with devastating force. Alex hung back, his heart pounding as he watched her fight. She was holding them off, but barely. The invaders were adapting, surrounding her, forcing her to retreat step by step. He knew he couldn't stand there doing nothing. Summoning every ounce of courage, Alex activated the alien weapon in his hands. The blade pulsed with blue energy, humming softly as it came to life. He charged toward one of the smaller invaders, his muscles screaming in protest. The creature turned toward him, its red eyes narrowing in recognition, but Alex didn't give it a chance to react. He swung the blade with all his strength, the energy pulse amplifying his strike. The invader crumpled to the ground, its body sparking and twitching. "Not bad," Alex muttered to himself, adrenaline coursing through his veins. But there was no time to celebrate. Another invader lunged at him, its claws slicing through the air. He ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding the attack. The Queen glanced in his direction, her expression flashing with what might have been approval or concern. The leader of the invaders appeared next. It was even larger than the one they had fought before, its exoskeleton reinforced with black, jagged armor. It let out a bone-chilling screech, and the remaining invaders seemed to rally around it, moving with renewed aggression. The Queen roared in response, charging at the leader with reckless abandon. Their clash was brutal. The leader's claws raked across her armor, leaving deep gouges, but she countered with a vicious strike that shattered part of its arm. The ground shook beneath them as they traded blows, each strike more ferocious than the last. Alex could see she was slowing down. Her movements, once graceful and precise, were becoming heavier. The invaders had taken their toll on her, and the leader was capitalizing on her fatigue. Alex's chest tightened. She couldn't hold them off alone. "Think, Alex, think," he muttered, his mind racing. His gaze fell on the canyon below. The glowing veins running through the rock weren't just decorative. They were energy conduits, pulsing with raw power. If he could redirect that energy. He spotted a cluster of strange, crystalline formations near the edge of the cliff. The Queen had mentioned earlier that the crystals were volatile when struck with enough force. It was a gamble, but it was all he had. "Hey!" Alex shouted, drawing the attention of both the Queen and the leader. He pointed to the crystals, then mimicked an explosion with his hands. The Queen hesitated, her glowing eyes narrowing as she processed his plan. With a growl, she nodded. Alex sprinted toward the crystals, dodging swipes and strikes from the smaller invaders. The Queen threw herself at the leader, keeping it distracted as Alex reached the edge. He swung his weapon down on the crystals, the blade's energy pulse igniting them in a brilliant flash of light. The ground beneath them trembled. A chain reaction began, the glowing veins lighting up like a circuit board. The invaders screeched in unison, their movements becoming erratic as the energy overwhelmed their systems. "Jump!" Alex shouted, turning to the Queen. She glanced at him, then at the collapsing ground beneath her. With one final defiant roar, she launched herself toward Alex, her powerful legs propelling her across the crumbling cliff. They hit the ground hard on the other side of the canyon, the impact knocking the wind out of Alex. He rolled onto his back, gasping for air. Beside him, the Queen rose to her feet, battered but alive. She extended a hand, pulling him up with ease. The invaders were gone, their remains swallowed by the energy surging through the canyon. For the first time in hours, the forest was silent. Alex turned to the Queen, his chest heaving. "We did it," he said, a shaky smile spreading across his face. She didn't respond, but the faint flicker of her glowing markings told him everything he needed to know. For now, they had survived. But Alex knew this was only the beginning. The departure. The alien Queen stood silently at the base of the alien ship, her massive frame illuminated by the soft glow of the planet's twin moons. Alex stood a few feet away, staring up at the craft that would take him home. It was ancient but intact, its sleek design bearing the same glowing markings as the Queen's armor. The forest behind them was quiet now, the faint hum of energy from the distant canyon the only sound. The battle was over, but Alex felt no relief. Instead, he was gripped by a strange, hollow ache, a feeling that he wasn't ready to leave. He turned to the Queen, his gaze lingering on her battle-worn figure. The glowing scars that crisscrossed her skin, the faint shimmer of her markings, and the quiet strength in her glowing blue eyes spoke volumes. She had saved his life more times than he could count. And now, as he stood on the precipice of leaving this strange, beautiful world, he realized she had become more than just a savior. She was a friend. "This ship," Alex began, his voice thick with emotion. "It can get me back to Earth, right?" The Queen didn't respond with words. She rarely did. Instead, she raised her hand and touched the side of the ship. A faint glow spread across its surface, and a holographic map appeared in the air. It displayed a route through the stars, one that led directly to Earth. She looked at Alex and gave a single, deliberate nod. Alex swallowed hard. He should have felt relief, even joy, but instead, all he felt was the weight of everything he was leaving behind. He hesitated, his mind racing. Was this really goodbye? "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You saved my life. You gave me a chance." The Queen tilted her head, her glowing eyes softening. She reached into a small compartment on her belt and pulled out an object. It was a smooth, crystal-like orb, no larger than Alex's palm. Inside, faint patterns swirled like tiny galaxies trapped in glass. She placed the orb in his hand, her touch surprisingly gentle for someone so strong. Alex stared at it, confused, until she reached out and tapped the side of his head. Her meaning was clear: memory, knowledge, connection. "This is from your world?" he asked. She nodded. Alex clenched the orb tightly, feeling its faint warmth against his skin. It was a piece of her people, her past, a gift far more valuable than anything he could have imagined. Just as he was about to thank her, a distant sound broke the silence. A low, mechanical hum. Alex's blood ran cold as he turned to look at the horizon. There, in the distance, faint red lights blinked against the dark sky. More invaders were coming. "They're not stopping," Alex muttered, his voice tinged with frustration. He turned back to the Queen, who was already looking at him, her expression calm but resolute. She raised her weapon and pointed to the horizon, then to herself. "You're staying to fight," Alex said, understanding immediately. "Of course you are." Her gaze shifted back to him, her glowing markings flaring briefly. She tapped the orb in his hand again, then pointed at the ship. "Go. Survive. Remember." Alex wanted to argue, to tell her he could stay and help, but he knew it was useless. This wasn't his fight. Not anymore. The Queen had a purpose here, a mission far bigger than either of them. He wasn't part of her world, and she couldn't leave it behind. He nodded, his throat tight. "I'll never forget this," he said. "I'll never forget you." The Queen stepped back, her massive form framed by the moonlight. She raised her hand, a gesture of farewell, and for the first time, Alex thought he saw the faintest hint of a smile on her face. With a heavy heart, Alex climbed into the ship. The controls lit up as if recognizing him, and the holographic map shifted into focus. He placed the orb carefully in a compartment by the console, its glow casting soft patterns across the walls. As the ship's engines roared to life, Alex took one last look at the Queen. She stood tall and unyielding, her glowing eyes locked on the horizon, where the invaders' red lights grew brighter. She was ready to face them, to defend her home, no matter the cost. The ship rose into the sky, the planet's surface growing smaller and smaller beneath him. Alex's chest tightened as he watched the Queen fade from view, her figure disappearing into the forest's glow. He didn't feel like a survivor. He felt like he was leaving something behind, someone behind. As the ship broke through the planet's atmosphere and into the endless expanse of space, Alex opened the orb. A small hologram flickered to life, showing an image of the Queen's homeworld as it once was. Beautiful, vibrant, alive. It was a reminder of everything she had lost, and everything she was still fighting for. Alex leaned back in his seat, the stars stretching out before him. He didn't know what the future held, but he made himself a promise. He would return, not as a lost explorer, but as an ally. Somewhere, in the distance, the faint hum of the ship's engines mixed with a single word whispered in his mind. "Friend."